This is my presentation on Sergei Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe. Now, ballet began in the 1500s in Italy and was developed further in France, but today, at least in my opinion, ballet is most distinctly Russian, probably because some of the most prolific dancers, choreographers, and designers have come from Russia or the former USSR. And a lot of that is thanks to this man right here, Sergei Diaghilev, who was born on March 31st, 1872 in the Novgorod province. His father was a colonel in the Russian cavalry and owned many successful vodka distilleries, which he was heir to. His mother would die a few months after he was born, and his father would remarry 2 years later, and Diaghilev's stepmother would be the one to encourage his artistic side, and he was enrolled in piano lessons at a very young age. He would study law at the University of St. Petersburg, and there he would meet a group of men that were deeply interested in music, painting, and the social sciences. This group would include Alexander Benoit, a Russian artist and art critic, and Leon Bakst, a Russian painter and scenic designer who will be very influential later. In 1896, Diaghilev graduated and decided to pursue a career in composing, but he was dissuaded by composer Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov because he was not great at it. And this would prompt him to decide to become a patron of the arts. And in 1897, he would organize his first art exhibition. In 1899, he would meet Mikhail Fokin, who will be very influential later as well, and he was the choreographer. Now, before his first ever art exhibition, Diaghilev would write in his journal, "Russian art will not only begin to play a role, it will also become an actual fact, and in the broader meaning of the world, one of the principal leaders of our imminent movement of enlightenment." So in 1906, Diaghilev would leave Russia for Paris and host the first of his exhibitions of Russian art in the Salon des Automnes. In 1907, he would put on a series of concerts called the Russian Historical Concerts in Paris, and he would also go back to Russia to attend a ballet choreographed and designed by Fokin and Benoit. In 1908, he presents the opera Boris Godunov, and it is the first time this opera had ever been performed outside of Russia. Then, having been convinced by Fokin to include ballet in his next presentation in Paris, following the performance he saw, Diaghilev would open the first season of the Ballet Russe at the Théâtre du Châtelet in 1909. The first season would include performances inspired by American ballerina Isadora Duncan's choreography, Richard Wagner's compositions, and the theories of Charles Baudelaire. The company would perform Le Pavillon de Armide, Prince Igor, Le Fist, Les Sulfites, and Cléopâtre. These performances would solidify Diaghilev's career as a ballet impresario and his position in ballet history. This company was unique in that it was made up entirely of Russian and Russian-trained artists, and the first year, the first company, as it would not have a solid core for years, as most of the dancers were on break from the Imperial Ballet Academy, included Benoit and Bakst as a set and costume designer, Tamara Karsavina and Alexandra Baltina as soloists, and most notably Vaslav Nijinsky and Anna Pavlova, two of the greatest dancers to emerge from the Ballet Russe. And if you know anything about ballet, you will know about Anna Pavlova, as she is probably one of the most iconic ballet dancers ever, really. And now these are pictures. I'm not certain if whose left the picture on the left is, but the picture on the left of the guy with the hands like flat is Nijinsky in costume for Le Fond, I believe is the performance, which is a performance that he choreographed himself. In the center is Anna Pavlova in costume for a performance of Les Sylphides, and on the right is Fokine as a dancer when he was younger, dressed for Harlequinade. Now, these are some of the designs that you'll see, and on the left is Alexander Benoit, who shows designs for Les Sylphides, and on the right are designs from Leon Bakst, who designed for things like Cleopatra. Now, the style of Ballet Russe is very special, particularly for this time period. It would draw a lot of inspiration from Russian culture and Russian traditional themes. The company would become a bastion for the avant-garde and was heavily influenced by the Art Nouveau. And the dancing would lead heavily into eroticism before the First World War, which was unique for the time period. The choreography also developed a new vocabulary of movement that was defined by mime and action dance rather than divertissements, as they were called, or moments in a ballet that have little to no relevance to a story, but are rather there just to show a dancer's capability in pirouettes or jumps and such. It was more about, this is the storyline and the movement of the story rather than just showing off, kind of. Despite this, though, they would still present some classical ballets like Les Sylphides or Giselle, but they were few and far between in the repertoire. The costumes, especially in the early period, were defined by bright colors and jewels, and after the war the company would turn to modernism, cubism, surrealism, and futurism. And you can see some of the designs in the pictures on this slide, particularly the design of a costume for the ballet Parade, which was entirely designed by Pablo Picasso. And then you have a Bayon Moussaguet, I believe is how you pronounce it, with Sergei Lefar and Alice Nikitina. And you can see these very unique, very androgynous sort of costumes for this ballet. And then the Prodigal Son, or the Prodigal Son, which was choreographed by George Balanchine. And this ballet also has a very distinct look and a lot of modernist, futurist sort of styles. Now, the history continues, and for the 1910 season, Igor Stravinsky was a young composer, and he was commissioned for a new score, and he would create The Firebird, a piece that would catapult him into international acclaim. The ballet is based on a Russian folk tale about Prince Ivan and a firebird who helps him defeat Kashki, an evil wizard. This season would also include Le Carnaval, Scheherazade, Le Chat, and Giselle. In 1911, the Ballet Russe was so popular that Diaghilev decided to make it a permanent ballet company, and this season would feature the ballets Le Spectre de la Rose, Narcisse, an excerpt from the opera Sadko, and one from the ballet Swan Lake, and most notably Petrushka, which is now considered a classic, at least in Russia. This season, Nijinsky would also settle with the company permanently after being dismissed from the Imperial Theatre. In 1912, the season would be Fokine's last, as he was growing frustrated with Diaghilev's encouragement of Nijinsky's choreographic adventures, especially because Nijinsky was known to be Diaghilev's lover at the time. This would briefly promote Nijinsky to the position of head choreographer, and his artistic influence would bring a sculptural aspect to the dancing. In 1913, Nijinsky would be removed from the company because he got married while on tour with the Ballet Russe in South America. This would also be the year The Rite of Spring premiered, and this was composed by Stravinsky and choreographed by Nijinsky. It was based on Russian folklore and Stravinsky's ideas of paganism, and is about the ritual sacrifice of a virgin who dances herself to death upon the return of spring. The audience became very rowdy during the performance and supposedly rioted in response. And this brings us towards the end of the Ballet Russe. The war years proved to be difficult for the ballet, as their primary venue was no longer accessible, and yet they still continued performing. The most notable performances of this time were Papillon in 1914, La Soleil de Nuit in 1915, a tour of the US under Nijinsky's direction in 1916, and Parade, which was designed by Pablo Picasso in 1917. Following the Russian Revolution, Diaghilev was banished from Russia, and he would move from Paris to, I believe, Argentina, and then to London, and also faced a great deal of financial difficulty with the company. In 1923, Ballet Russe premieres Danse Russe, and in 1924, George Balanchine joins the Ballet Russe as a dancer and choreographer. He was a defector from the recently formed Soviet Union. In 1929, two new ballets premiered, La Balle and La Fille Prodigue, which were both choreographed by Balanchine, and La Fille Prodigue is still commonly performed. This season, although, would be Diaghilev's last, as he would die on August 19th in Venice, and his death would begin the decline of the company. Now, I have shown above a design by Benoit for the production Petrushka, and a sketch of Branislava Nijinská, the sister of Nijinsky, by Jean Cocteau, who would also be very involved in the Ballet Russe before its demise. Now, the impact of the Ballet Russe is very important to the ballet world, as it helped bring the Russian ballet tradition to the West and create a new style of not just design, but also movement that we still see today. Many of the dancers and choreographers that were a part of the Ballet Russe would also move to the US and create a new generation of American ballet. Vauquin, particularly, would co-found the American Ballet Company, now known as the American Ballet Theater. George Balanchine would move to the US and co-found the School of American Ballet, which produced some of the greatest American ballet dancers, and still does. He would also help found the New York City Ballet and create his own style of ballet based partly on his time with the Ballet Russe. Balanchine is one of the most influential choreographers to have ever lived, and it's not an exaggeration when I say that. You can ask any ballet dancer, anybody who knows anything about the ballet world. George Balanchine is one of the greatest. Ballet Russe would also push the male ballet dancer to the forefront and make them a major star of ballet. And this would start with Nijinsky. They were given a place of honor within the company and paved the way for some of the greats like Rudolf Nureyev and Mikhail Baryshnikov, both who defected from the USSR and rose to stardom within the West. And I have some photos of some prolific Russian dancers. At the top left, is Natalia Makarova in Les Sylphides. She defected from the USSR as well. And then beneath her, we have Rudolf Nureyev in Romeo and Juliet. He also created some very complex ballets in his time. The top right, you have Mikhail Baryshnikov in Don Quixote. He is one of the best dancers to have ever lived. I am completely serious when I say this. He's fantastic. You can watch him dance, and you watch recordings of him dance, and you can hear the audience like audibly gasp whenever he does something. And then in the middle, you have Natalia Osipova in Giselle, and she is a soloist and I think a principal with the Royal Ballet, which was heavily influenced by dancers from the Ballet Russe. And then below that, you have Balanchine teaching, and you can see some of the hallmarks of his style, particularly the hands. And that is my presentation on the Ballet Russe. Here are my sources. I hope this wasn't too long. Thanks.